Okay, so thank you very much for this opportunity. I'll show you some basic elements of our book and with a few slides, and then if there is time, we'll talk about them, about the whole thing more thoroughly later on. So this is the book. Doesn't go down. Do you see the slide?
Yes, we see the slide. Yeah, that's
okay.
That's good.
So we tried to provide a novel, what we call a novel, some way heterodox view of the global evolution of capitalism and socialism. So extending the basic framework of interpretation of what is called the modern classical economic theory, that is largely shared by most modern Marxists. And we propose a partial interpretation of various Marxian categories. Of course, the most important one is the mode of production, on the basis of the lessons of history, of course. Do you see it? Yes. Can you see the slide?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, okay. So in our view, the mode of production has to be seen as an abstract system. And we try to apply this category at a very high level of abstraction. So in our way, a mode of production has to be seen as a set of internally consistent rules and laws of self-preservation and movement of an economic system. On the other hand, socioeconomic formations are concrete, historically existing objects, and they are essentially a specific complex of social relations of production and exchange that obtain in a certain country or group of countries over a long period of time. And on a global scale, the dominant social relations of production and exchange are decisively, but not exclusively, influenced by the power of the strongest and most advanced countries that in turn are essentially run by the interests of their ruling classes or powerful social groups. So we also utilize slightly different concepts such as primacy, dominance, and prevalence to try to describe the coexistence of different MPs. So essentially, in our view, one mode of production has primacy in a certain socioeconomic formation if it is the most important and relevant. For instance, in the USA, we can say that almost 100% the country is obviously capitalist. But in most other cases, especially in the global south, the primacy of one mode of production over the other is a relative one, because several different modes of production coexist in a flux and in a dialectic relationship among themselves. So in our way, in our view also, we have to distinguish between dominance and prevalence. The dominance of a given mode of production manifests itself in a hierarchical vertical fashion. So, for instance, in a place like India, it's clear that the dominant mode of production is capitalism. On the other hand, prevalence refers to the social relation of production that provide the livelihood of the majority. So again in India, but in most parts of the global south, there are a lot of subsistence peasants, informal workers, etc. Essentially, if you look at them at the microeconomic levels, they do not essentially live and reproduce themselves inside really capitalist social relations of production. But nevertheless, they submitted to the dominance of capitalism. Okay, so the world is a complicated matter, and not all social economic formations are the same. In particular, there is a small class of socialist-oriented socioeconomic formations, and which are countries that are not dominated by an exploitative ruling class. On the other hand, they do not fully embody pure socialist principles either. So elements of socialism are present in these countries, in these socioeconomic formations, and they're hegemonic, but they're not. But they do not dominate the whole country. So there is also in all these countries a non-hegemonic capitalist class still exists, and the crucial issue is to see the relationship between the socialist-oriented forces that retain the political power and the presence and the activities of this capitalist class. As far as it is not hegemonic, it's legitimate to talk tentatively about socialism. Of course, it's not a perfect form of socialism. And what are now socialist-oriented socioeconomic formations might or not evolve in the future towards more advanced forms of market socialism. Okay, so the key argument of our book is that the end of the first socialist experiences in Europe and Central Asia was not the end of history. More advanced processes of socialist-oriented development are presently unfolding in various countries, and they constitute a promising example and the reason of hope for socialists and progressives all over the world. We also have three major propositions that we try to put forward in our book. The first is, during most epochs, one mode of production tends to be globally dominant, but there are also historical periods where a transition occurs from one another to another dominant mode of production. This happens at global level and also happens at national level. So, as a general rule, two or more modes of production coexist in all countries, and their interrelationship evolves in a state of perennial flux. And our third proposition is that this does not mean that we can have any kind of configurations of different modes of production. Only some configurations of modes of production can historically occur both at the national and international level, because there is a set of immanent and universal structural restrictions that we call meta mode of productions. And these restrictions constrain, in practical terms, the degrees of freedom of all national attempts to proceed towards socialism, overcoming capitalism. So, socialist-oriented developmental states, because all these states are also developmental states, must promote GDP growth and technical progress, of course, but they must also promote the expansion of the welfare state, so basic services, safety nets, etc. Finding a proper harmonic equilibrium between these two different goals. And they must do such a thing without excessively challenging the low barrier. In particular, in our view, the state can and should hold on publicly owned capital and try to ever increase the value of this capital. So there is the phenomenon of capital valorization is not unique to capitalism, but it also applies to socialism. And they also must try, as they're doing, try to transform core industrial enterprises into international competitive national champions. in order to have sectoral leaders as harbingers and facilitators of the march of the entire domestic economy towards the global technology frontier and hopefully beyond. At present, almost all socialist-oriented socioeconomic formations, among all, the People's Republic of China is the only one that is the one that has advanced most, but it's not the only one that is existing. So we also introduced the concept of new projectment economy. So while the other propositions, about the other proposition, we are reasonably certain of being able to demonstrate their correctness. With respect to this last but not least important concept and category, we consider it at a lower level of seriousness, and we consider that now essentially that present-day China is possibly tentatively entered a new stage, and we call this new stage of development of China new projectment economy. Anyway, this development is a very recent one that cannot be firmly identified yet. So what's projectment? The projectment is the ability on the part of a state to engineer quality leaps by means of ad hoc, focused and coordinated initiatives that are able to channel enormous resources towards specific paramount goals, some of which are related to the development of productive forces, while other ones are essentially aimed at the direct solution of major social and environmental problems. These kind of major actions that are necessary for the development of socialist countries and ultimately for the survival of the whole humanity are not, by their own nature, are not amenable to be taken via market mechanisms. So the only way is to utilize large sums of capital mediated by state-owned banks in order to earmark them towards a vast array of policy tools that are aimed at these goals. And these policy tools are plans, projects, industrial policies, regulation, institutional changes, and the like. So major examples of the quality leaps I was talking about are the BRI, the Made in China 2025, and the recently concluded anti-poverty plan. For instance, and there is an evolution also of qualitative nature. For instance, in the 14th five-year plan of China, we see that there is not a specific GDP growth target, but there are identified specific goals also in other indicators, including unemployment, energy consumption, and so on, in order to improve people's livelihood and quality of development and not being obsessed exclusively attached to the very limited concept of GDP. So, from a theoretical point of view, after all, there is nothing in the new projectment economy that is completely new as such, if you take it alone. What's new is the combination of an unprecedented scale of pre-existing elements. So we can tentatively consider this new projectment economy as a sub-period belonging to the second long-term development period of China as a marxist socialist socioeconomic formation. As we know, this second period initiated basically in 1978 and has brought China to become a powerful market socialist economy. I conclude mentioning Vietnam. There is a whole part of the book dedicated to Vietnam, and we try to show that Vietnam, in a completely independent way, is broadly advancing on a similar trajectory with respect to China. But as it is less advanced, we don't see elements of such a quality leap in Vietnam yet, in spite of the fact that Vietnam's economy is basically doing pretty well. Okay, I'm done.
I'm Michael Hudson. I'm appearing here for the International Manifesto Group. If you like this video and ones like it, please subscribe. For more information, go to the address on the screen.